Agenda. It is 2:31, Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. The elected officials are Councillor Christensen, Councillor Garrett, Councillor McKay, Councillor Whipple, and Councillor Bogdan. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions. Unless otherwise invited by the chair, please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. When speaking, please be sure to use the microphone so the record is clear and those attending virtually can hear you. Please also be sure to limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the workroom. And councilors, I'll just remind you to turn your microphone on when you want to speak. Our first item of business is an update on the Provo River Bridge and Trail at 820 North. This will be presented by Gordon Haight, our Director of Public Works. And I gotta say, I'm just blown away by how much work you guys have put into this and how much time and public input, and I think it's fantastic.
So this, appreciate being here with the council. This is an information item. When we first came to the council a number of months ago to talk about this funding, there was a lot of concern and discussion among the council about what this meant, the impact to the neighborhood, and what we're going to end up with the design. And so we've gone through a fairly lengthy public input. We've done a lot of discussion with UDOT and MAG and internally with the consultants. And so here to present is Vern and Dave Mickelson, the ones that kind of spearheaded this in the community. So I wanted them to describe the process, the outcome, and kind of where we are and what we're going to be going forward with. Again, we just wanted to make sure we came back to you and show you what's happening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Happy to be here, actually. Really excited to share with you the public process that we went through with the Provo River Bridge and Trail. As many of you know, it's been on our general plan since 1977. And this particular project is just the bridge. And the bridge is a bridge that needs some repair and needs replacement. And I think everybody's familiar with how old the bridge is. It dates back to the early 60s. And it's reaching its life cycle span. So we applied for some money and received $13.6 million from MAG, actually 12.7, but our matching was 7% of that. So the total project is about $13.67 million. And our goal is, we talked about providing a safe, we talked about enhancing active transportation, and we talked about planning not only for now, but also in the future. While the federal, state, metropolitan planning organization, and county government did not require any public outreach, Provo City said, this is the right thing to do. Let's go out and do public outreach. And we did that. And these are some of the meetings that we attended. We specifically, I want to call out a few meetings because we went to the River Road and we went to the North Park meetings. And we went to the park and met with folks inside the park. And these are people that live right along 820. So they know very well about the project of the bridge. And of course, there's always been concern about the future, right? And so we reached out. We actually held a big general public meeting on June 6th. We had well over 100 attendees at that meeting. We had well over 60 written comments. And then throughout our presentational meetings that we did with the public, from downtown Provo to Bike Walk Provo to whatever organization we were in front of, we received many verbal comments as well. And so we took all those into consideration. We'll go to the next page. One of the next slide, please. The next, it was interesting. Oh, we got it right here. It was interesting because we went out with a couple of proposals and we wanted to do public comment, and we received excellent public comment. to the point where we received ideas that we did not even consider in our first original design of the two options that we put out to the public. One of those things was, hey, 850 West has got some concerns already. It's got some major safety issues. There's over 1,300 vehicles a day turning left from 820 North onto 850 West on that blind curve with traffic that's supposed to only be doing 25 miles an hour coming at you. So what we learned from the neighborhood was close that road off earlier. You're going to close it as part of the project anyway. Close it sooner rather than later. Fortunately, we have a great grid system, and that 1,300 vehicles can be dispersed equally between 700, 750, and 800 west to access that left turn. Very fortunate in that respect. So that's just one of the things. The other thing that we heard was traffic calming. So as we took a look at our lane size, and most of that, depending on the higher speed, you do 12 lanes or 12-foot lanes, and you can do up to 14-foot lanes depending on the speed limit. We heard, hey, keep the lanes smaller. So we've done it. And so I'm going to turn the rest of the time over to Dave Nicholson, our project design engineer for this particular project, who's going to talk a little bit about the proposed cross sections that we put forward, the 71 foot and the 99 foot, and then what we selected. Okay.
So as Vern highlighted, we looked at 850 West and we're considering that at closing sooner. As part of the project next year, we will be closing off 900 West there with a cul-de-sac. That's kind of the option that we're pursuing there. So this was, as we went through all these public outreach, these were the two options that we presented. This was kind of to align with our master plan, our transportation master plan, having a 71 foot bridge or 99 foot bridge. And those were ample amounts of space. I mean, these were all kind of maximum engineering standards, 12 foot lanes, 9 foot shoulders. And this would provide a lot of room, a lot of extra space that we didn't need. And so through the process, like Vern mentioned, we listened to the comments and we got a lot of good feedback. And so we went through a modification process, and Vern and I went and visited every bridge here in Provo, and we measured it, and we went and walked it, and we felt, what it was like going on the vehicle as a pedestrian, and we came up with this option as an 83 foot bridge. And this is the bridge width that we feel is going to be appropriate here for now and in the future. As you can see, we kind of have the same two layouts as we use in our public information outreach, of one as the interim and one for full build out. In the interim, we are going to be narrowing that road down to 45 feet. The existing road on either side of the bridge currently is 48 feet. And so we are trying to narrow that down a little bit to help with some of that speeding across the bridge. One suggestion we got was to put in kind of those plastic barriers on the bike lane to kind of help make that feel a little bit more secure across the bridge. We'll use the amenity zone for some visual improvements, some benches, and then we've kind of built this out so that it'll be equal on either side to help kind of integrate that into that walking areas. And as I worked with our design team, we've got some really good ideas, and we hope to come back in a couple of months as we've got some concrete things put together to see how those aesthetics will come together. And in the full build out, we're going to reduce that median down to 4 feet with a foot buffer, so a 6 foot median with a hard island across the bridge, and reducing those to 6 foot lanes, 6 foot bike lane, and maintaining those pedestrian paths across the bridge. And this width lines up with a lot of the other bridges here in Provo. We feel this is pretty standard for both UDOT and Provo bridges that have been built in the past. So we feel really good about this. And this is a direct result of the input that we got back from the community. This wasn't something that we had in mind at all going into this. And so we feel really, really strong about this. We don't think this will appease everyone, but we think this is going to be, match what Provo City is going to need in the future, but also is going to address some of those concerns in the interim.
Great.
Any questions?
Any questions? Counselor Handley. We'd like to recognize that Counselor Handley and Counselor Hooper have joined us.
So can you explain what the full build out, what triggers that build out?
It's a good question. What would trigger that would be, probably funding. That's a big one. But it would trigger once we have those thresholds of traffic that we're seeing on that road. That would warrant that widening of that road. We don't anticipate from all our modeling and everything we have, we don't anticipate that for 15 to 20 years. And funding for something like this would be quite large. And so, as a guess, a good guesstimate would be 20 years is what that would trigger.
So if it's that far out, what, I mean, what's the logic behind saying you need that much room anyway, I guess?
50-year bridge.
As opposed to the 71-foot option you had?
Yeah, I think it's this balance of, we have funding now. We have the $13.6 million at the bridge now. And over 20 years, construction materials are just gonna increase. And it is unlikely that we would be able to get additional funding if we needed to widen that bridge in the future, since we've already received funding for a bridge now. MAG has approved this construction to have a 5-lane facility. And so we met with MAG and showed these options, and they feel that this meets what the criteria that we applied for. Obviously, we don't need this much space now, and so that's kind of what we showed MAG is like, if we built an interim like this, would it still meet the funding requirements, and they felt that it did. And so those are the kind of the things that kind of contributed to why we would want to build it this way now.
The lifespan of a bridge?
And the lifespan too.
Which
Is that independent of the question of the future of 820 North and any potential widening, or is that because they have that still in mind, or?
It definitely is an input. It's a factor. I mean, MAG shows on their plans that the road will be widened. And when we applied for this, we showed a much larger bridge than what we even proposed as part of this project to MAG for the funding. And so I think in their mind, keeping those factors in mind, then they are expecting that this road will be widened. And so they want the bridge to be built accordingly to that plan.
I thought I heard that it was no longer part of their plan. Is that not accurate?
On MAG, it is still included as a widening project. It's worded differently in the Provo master plan, but still on MAG's longer term plan, it still shows as a widening project.
What is the lifespan of this bridge, the number of years?
Yeah, this will be a 75-year lifespan.
Counselor Garrett.
You're showing the bridge cross section here. What, as you come off the bridge, either westbound or eastbound, what becomes of the bike lane, the walk path? How far along are those carried on 820? So we're in very, very early design. We're pretty 30%. But looking at what it will do is we'll transition back into the existing facilities. And so we anticipate that everything will be tied in. I'll show you actually. We anticipate everything, kind of how those kind of blacked out areas, we anticipate that's where these improvements will carry. We won't carry the 10-foot walk past that. We'll probably do a 6-foot walk tie into the bridge, into the existing 4-foot or 5-foot walks that are out there. But it will mostly depend on grade. So we'll chase it as far as we need to tie back into existing, but we don't anticipate going past that.
Any other questions? All right. Oh, Counselor Hoban.
I think I'd just like to know, maybe we can get some more solid information around what would trigger the full build out. I mean, I know it's 20 years or, is there a certain traffic number? It'd just be nice to know what that is. Because it seems like that's something we should be thinking about if we're thinking like, hey, let's build it so we can build it out. Okay, so to what end, what's the trigger? Is it definitive? Is it just kind of up in the air?
Councilor Hogan, I think that's a really good question. Our travel demand model that we use is the Mountain Land Association of Governments and Wasatch Front Regional Council travel demand model. So it stretches from Brigham City down to Santa Clara. Our model is showing about 2042 to 2045. There will be a need from a traffic perspective along this corridor, especially at the east and west ends. Maybe not so much right in the middle where the bridge itself is at this point in time. But if you have traffic going through from one end to the other and not turning off, then we need to plan accordingly. It is really going to be funding dependent and growth dependent. If we don't grow, traffic volumes are not going to grow. If we do grow, which I suspect will continue to do so, then we are going to need more space for these vehicles, unless there is a huge monstrous shift in mode travel. Okay, short of us all going to bikes and we don't have no winters and everybody's healthy as other people in this room are, that's kind of where we're at.
And is there any conversation around what to do about, the school and the train tracks? Because that's where I view the real bottlenecks being is, traffic really backs up at that school 2 times a day and at the train tracks, 6 to 9 times a day. Sometimes worse than others, depending on, if it's rush hour or whatever. So what's kind of the thought process around those? I know it's too early probably to talk about that, but.
No, I think that's a fair question. I think that some preliminary concepts that MAG has discussed, but not drawn out, is that both railroad crossings would be grade separated.
So
Chairman
under or
Kay?
over. You're saying under or over?
It would be over, yes, maybe. So they have looked at that and they are equating that into the cost of the entire project from Geneva Road to USA Fifth West.
Should do like Chicago and just fly that right over that school, then just keep it going.
I don't know anything about the design, but I will share with you, we not only met with Freedom Preparatory Academy, but we also met with the Provo School District.
All right. Well, we appreciate all the reach out you've done. All right. Thank you. Next, an ordinance amending Provo City Code Chapter 14.15 Citywide application. And this will be about residential manufactured home park zone, and this will be presented by Aaron Ardmore.
Yeah, thank you, Council. This is on your agenda for tonight. This went in front of the Plan Commission and was recommended for approval. 8-0. This started with, as some of you might know, some enforcement actions at a couple different parks throughout the city that the city's currently going through. So let me back up. These parks, this zone was never meant to have permanent facilities, permanent structures. And it's become an issue in the couple that we're enforcing on of having permanent garages installed. So the original intent of this amendment was just to simply remove garages as a permitted accessory use. However, as we dove into it, there's a lot of good cleanup work done by Provo Legal that we found of changing some wording around and updating codes to be compliant with today's standards. So that's what's in front of you tonight, and I'm happy to try to address any questions.
Any questions for Aaron? Councilor Whipple.
Yes, so it sounds like it has been legal to build garages so far.
Yes, it's permitted accessory use. under the
So
code.
have garages been legally built, like following the process?
They've
Or
been built,
But-
but not following the process. So built
Okay.
without permits, built outside of permitted setback areas, things like that.
So you think it's easier to say no garages whatsoever than to try to have people follow the process?
That's correct. In this zone especially, these mobile home park zones were not meant to have permanent structures really, except for the clubhouse. These are lots that people can bring their mobile at home to and place it, rent the space, move it out when they're done. So having a permanent structure, whether it's permitted and in the right spot according to setbacks or not, was seen as problematic, especially with our building division.
Okay, but we still allow gardening sheds and carports and things like that?
Yeah, stuff that you can just put on slab, I think is a little easier. You can just remove the tuck shed and things like that.
Okay, but wouldn't you still run into the same problems with those structures that you do with the garages, or not because they're smaller? I'm trying to.
So, yeah,
understand.
so anything under 200 square feet is not gonna require a permit. So then they just have to be mindful of their spacing requirements, their requirements for the lot space and spacing from existing structures and things like that.
Okay. And why was the fence height changed from 6 foot to 7 foot?
That's just to follow code that's already been changed elsewhere.
Okay.
So we raised that a year or so ago to match building code.
Okay, so that's just a consistency
Yeah.
thing, okay. I'll turn it over to you guys, sorry.
Counselor Christensen.
I just had a question about those structures that were built without any kind of approval of code. Does anything happen to those?
So those are currently, our department's currently going through enforcement actions on things that were built without a permit. So that would.
And for my benefit, what is that? Did you ask them to take it down?
So in some cases, removing the whole structure, in some cases, removing portions of the structure and getting a permit for what's staying.
Any other questions for Aaron? All right, thanks, Aaron. Next, discussion regarding an ordinance to amend Provo City Code for parking requirements in the mixed-use zones. And this will be also presented by Aaron Arbor.
Okay, so this one was started by staff as well. We saw that, oops. Sorry, I probably jumped again. Ruined it. I said good.
All right. You're good.
Okay. All right, so there's the amendment. It's essentially just bringing this to the majority of the other zones of parking per 1437. Initially, when this zone was written, the idea of the zone was that it was going to be more about urban infill, downtown neighborhoods using the zone where it'd be a more walkable urban environment and the parking reduction would make sense. We've been seeing it applied out on the west side where that's not the case. So to avoid future problems out there, we're just asking the code change to park it at regular 100%, whatever the standard is based on the use.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I think this is long overdue, and Bill has mentioned issues with this for some time. So I'm glad that we're finally addressing it. We definitely experienced that with Turley's project,
Right.
that on the west side where, and again, they can always apply for this. They can still apply to have a reduction, and if it makes sense for reduction, then great.
Yeah, we still have other tools.
But it's not just a given, and I think people were even doing this zone just to get the reduction.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
All right, any questions for? All right, thanks, Aaron. All right, you're the next one too, so just stay there. All right, a discussion regarding ordinance to amend on-premise short hold time electronic display signs. And this is again, Aaron Ardmore, our planning supervisor.
So this one was actually an outside applicant. So this, Lisa Hancock is applying on behalf of the medical building on North University. Let me go there. So this building, you may be familiar with, we probably all pass it every day. They've been very limited in what they can advertise on that. On the bottom right picture is their sign. However, they have multiple tenants in the building and they'd all like to advertise the business. If you look at this map, areas in green show current allowance for multi-tenant electronic display signs to roll through every minute to advertise the businesses within the building. So this request from them is to add that section in red to that ordinance to allow for a short hold electronic display signs. And in truth, the only properties, if you can see the dashed line, it's hard to see on this. There's only about 5 properties in this corridor that could actually use this code because of the zoning, the underlying zoning. So there's not much risk, and as we see a pretty good economic development benefit for pushing this forward. So we've recommended approval on this, and the planning commission has done the same.
Thanks, Aaron. I did listen to the planning commission and I liked that the applicant said they'd be putting their sign on the south side
Yes.
away from the apartments. So you guys will hold them to that since they,
Yeah, and that was a really nice proactive thing for them to offer, and we are definitely gonna follow up.
okay, yeah, because that just keeps it on the commercial side.
Right.
All right, any comments or questions for Councilor Bogdan?
So I have a couple. Are they willing to proffer a development agreement that they will stick that, or do we even?
So
Because
it's
it's code
not a development agreement is not a tool for a text amendment, so we're just gonna have to be vigilant with our approvals on the sign permit.
And why was this not included originally?
I don't know.
Just was an oversight on our part, just we didn't
Perhaps.
think about it. Okay. Thanks, Aaron.
Councilor Garrett,
So Aaron, you said 5 properties, which 5? Would they include the 2 on the east side that aren't those owned by BYU?
So anything in the blue, yes, they are owned by BYU. So the PF zone and the RC zone. Here,
those are not.
those underlying zones don't allow this type of sign on the property, so it's only the commercial zones that.
And why is the red dotted line? Why does it continue through those properties? On the east side of the road?
It doesn't, it's just on the dotted line is on the pink. Just point.
Sorry, let me correct myself, the PF zone does allow for it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, the PF zone does allow for it, so let me reverse my answer.
Okay.
So yeah, so BYU could, if they chose, apply for a sign permit for electronic sign there.
Which
So that is one of the 5.
would interfere with residential housing.
Across the street.
Yeah, just as much as anything that this group does, really.
Potentially it could, but we have pretty good rules within the electronic display sign, in Title VI on brightness, nighttime brightness, turn rate, things like that. But I think we're protected, but if there's another part of the code that we want to look at after it goes in or in advance of that, we could do that.
Councilor Christensen.
So I'm not as familiar with the code, so I have PSTB from the Blue Rock medical sign. Is this also to be used for advertising outside of the tenants? Is this just a small, I just didn't.
Offsite advertising is very restricted to what we have in the city, as far as billboards.
And how about the size of the sign?
The size is dependent upon the linear frontage of the lot. So the more frontage you have like that, the BYU property could probably have a bigger one than this medical office building, just because they have more frontage on the university.
Okay.
And we acknowledge that the Blue Rock one is illegal and could never be duplicated, right?
Correct.
I still have PSTD.
Yes,
Yeah.
as we should. All right, Councilor Whipple.
So given that it could be a relatively large sign, because that's my kid's pediatrician's office, I've been there for years. And it would be on the south side, are we concerned about any like visual impact with the driveways and everything like that?
No, we would ensure when the permit comes in that the clear vision triangle is respected, that it's behind the setback, not projecting into any kind of right of way. So all those things would be checked in the permit.
Yeah, but it seems like that should be difficult with that property, given that their parking lot is right there. There's not a lot of space for a sign to go that would be bigger.
Yeah, you're right. They do have a little landscape yard there, similar to the location that their current sign is in. They could kind of keep that same alignment on the south side of the building and still have it respect the clear vision triangle possibility.
Would they be able to keep this monument sign as well? So this would be additional?
They'd have to tear it down if they were proposing a new monument sign.
No, could they have this monument sign and an electronic sign?
No, because the electronic display sign would be the monument sign.
Okay.
And they only get one.
All right, thanks.
Counselor Bogdan.
Erin, didn't they say something that this sign would be similar to the CVS sign that's just not too far south from it?
Yeah, they may
During
have-
planning
I can't
commission?
recall, but I'm sure.
Well, that's a big tall one. So they could do that?
They, there's two different sign types, right? So, they could do a pole sign up to 35 feet in height, which it sounds like they're not even thinking about. Or they could do a monument sign, which is held at 5 feet.
Because the CVS is a pole sign.
So the CVS is probably technically considered the pole sign.
But we can't control, you're saying.
They can have one of those two sign types. So it's those sign types are permitted by code. What we're looking at is allowing it to be electronic display on short hold. So they're already permitted those two sign types.
I mean, I'm gonna sound really callous, but I don't understand I'm not persuaded by the argument because I find signs so appalling that like that's gonna make their business work that much better, especially in the age of Google Maps and internet, where if I need to know, where a dentist is, I'm not looking at the street to tell me where to shop. I'm looking before I leave, I know where I'm already going. And so I just don't understand the argument that this is somehow hurting their business. And maybe I'm missing some data on that, but I worry very much about, if it's more than 5, actually, if you're saying BYU can do this too, if we open this up.
So that BYU property was one of the 5 that I counted. I misspoke earlier.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
But how many signs in theory, so we could have 5 more signs
There could be
on that street that are all electric and there could be 30 feet high.
Good.
I don't want to support this.
30 feet.
I just don't see
Why
it.
30 feet high?
Not persuaded.
So the pole sign,
Oh,
the pole sign, if they chose to do a pole sign and then the sign up area is at the top of that.
I get it that there's like this equity issue, but on the other hand, like the equity issue just keeps pushing it out, right? So it's like, we keep saying we need more of it, and then you end up with, this glaring, you end up with the University Mall. That thing is an abomination. I can't, I think I'm surprised when you have that much light and that much action going on. I know this isn't a moving camera screen, right? But it's still light pollution. It's it's not the kind of feel I want to have in my town, but.
I suspect the applicant will be here tonight and maybe she can address some of those concerns and questions with you.
I get
I
the
don't
issue.
have a-
Yeah, even if I get the assurance from her though, I don't know what the other 4 are gonna do. I don't
Sure.
know what we've just unleashed as a possibility, so it makes me nervous that we're just ending up with a street corridor that's that much brighter, that much busier.
Well, I'd like to clarify something, Aaron. The only purpose of this application is to let the hold time be less than a minute, right?
Right.
So electronic signs are already allowed here. The only thing that the amendment does is it allows them to rotate the image every minute instead of every hour.
Oh, I
So
do
that they can
understand.
That's the
advertise
only
all of their folks, all of the.
Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. Good point.
I didn't understand that. Thank you. So other people just haven't chosen to do electronic signs on that.
I'm sorry.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
Well, and is the short hold time a more desirable sign? Like, would more people be inclined to do it if we change the hold time?
Depends on the business.
Yeah. One question that relates to the Blue Rock is if we're advertising for the different businesses that are in there and there's a urologist, they could do like a whole big prostate thing on, right? to talk about their business.
Blue Rocks was, he like the champion, it had a big racehorse.
Right.
That was the.
And so if the
You have a
individual.
Why would they even have a problem?
Yeah, or the uterine fibroids one, which is also on Blue Rock and things like that. So the way that the different businesses can choose to put out their name and advertise themselves is not content that we would have any ability to control. So whatever puns or images or or metaphors they want to use, they can do that.
Because freedom of speech, no,
Right.
We can regulate that.
Right, so it wouldn't just be, you know, Utah Valley Pediatrics and then the eyeglasses thing and then the, I don't know, what the prosthetics or whatever it is that they've got in there. It would just be the name of the business.
Could be. but
It
doesn't have to
could be,
Right.
yeah,
You're right.
okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Aaron?
Well, I'll just make a comment. I think because I was on the sign committee, it was the first committee I was on when I joined the council. And I would guess that this wasn't allowed here because of how it runs into the residential. And we were trying to be cognizant of not having rotations very often around residential. Now, maybe, you know, limited impact, I don't know, but just providing some context because somebody had asked why it wasn't allowed originally. And I think it was just, we tried to avoid the short hold time anywhere where it might be, you know, creating a Seinfeld type scenario, right? Where Kramer and the red glowing sign in his apartment.
Councilor Bogdan.
What is the state's hold time for like the mall sign? Cause I know those UDOT freeway signs have, is it 1 minute? Is it less than that? Is it more than
I
that?
don't know if you go by the word mall, it seems like there's no whole thing. It's just a-
Well, I mean, like ours,
So I'm not sure.
like our, like Provo Town Center. I know that Scott Bowles said that.
Yeah, 8
UDOT has
seconds,
one.
so on that sign specifically, it's 8 seconds, so.
Oh, so it is a
If
lot.
you have I-15 frontage, not talking about billboards. But that sign and any others that could be built like in the future, it's 8 second.
Those are 8-second hold times. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, are we done with Aaron?
Never.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Okay, next we have a discussion regarding ordinance to amend the zone map classification of real property located at 210 South, 500 West from residential conservation to general commercial. And this will be presented by Mary Barnes.
I'll try to make this really quick. I'm sure you guys will have questions. So just great context, this is just down the road, 210 South 500 West. You can see the city center there in that second map. The applicant is requesting this rezone from RC to CG to create a legal short-term rental. So with this rezone, short-term rental would be a conditional use in the new commercial or the general commercial zone. This rezone is a result of code enforcement proceedings that have been going on for the past few months. And the property does have existing commercial to the south. Even though that's in the RC zone, the property just to the south, it is a commercial use. But then all the other properties to the west, to the north, and then across 500 west to the east are currently being used as residential properties. Quickly, future land use maps, both future land use maps, the general plan and the Franklin plan show this corner as residential, single family residential. As I just mostly in this slide, I wanted to point out that all 4 corners of 200 South and 500 West have been specifically called out as single family residential. The technical advisory committees at that time decided that that was something important to them. And that was most of what I wanted to say there. All right. So these are some reasons for the proposal from the applicant. I'll just mention like 2 or 3. For example, this lot is a residentially zoned island. A rezone is needed to finish the block of commercially zoned properties. And to rezone a commercial would not intrude on the existing residential properties. To that, we would say that it's not a residentially zoned island, it's actually mostly surrounded by residential. And rezoning to commercial would create a whole new issue of now it's a commercially zoned property where other uses, other things can come in rather than just a short-term rental. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Another big reason for the proposed amendment that the applicant brought up was that 500 West is a busy road and keeping it RC would hurt the resale value. To that, we just say that there are existing residential properties along 500 West and many other busy roads in the city. And there's still viable places for people to live and for families to live as well. And then there's other reasons. I won't go through all of them right now, unless you want me to. Anyways, these are some reasons for denial that I should mention that staff is recommending denial. Some reasons for denial that staff has come up with is, well, obviously it's not compatible with the general plan or the Franklin plan. And then another big one is, like I said, the commercial general zone allows uses that are not compatible to the single family neighborhood to the west. This is kind of 200 south where the property is accessed from. You can see on that view from 200 south, that's where the driveway is. It is once you drive into there, you can definitely tell that you're a residential neighborhood from that point forward. You're no longer on 500 West. And then, of course, as you all know, short-term rentals, they don't preserve the character of the neighborhood. It's our policy to discourage them in residential zones. We anticipate that there would be a problem with parking if this got approved, that kind of thing. Although, if this rezone is approved, it would have to come back for a conditional use permit approval. So we could maybe address some things in there, but we anticipate that the required parking would not be able to fit onto the property. That's code enforcement history. That's already in the staff report from the planning commission, so I won't really go through that, but it did list some of the general commercial uses, some of the permitted and conditional uses that are listed in the code. So things like banks, food, restaurants, those are permitted, and then conditionals, car wash, automobile repair. Some more, it's a lot more intensive than the current use, well, the permitted current use, which is single family. We just anticipate that it would really affect the neighborhood, and this is a neighborhood that has historically been very affected. And then quick summary of planning commission on June 26th. They did recommend denial. Some of the reasons, I listed them at the bottom, but same thing, commercial uses do not surround the subject property. They're not compatible with the residential street of 200 South. It would reduce the housing supply, possibly set a precedence for other people, etc. And yeah, we recommend denying this item. Any questions?
Thanks, Mary. Any questions for Mary? Counselor Hanley.
So the complaints that came forward, were they simply because they saw that it was being used as an SDR, or was it also because was the parking a problem?
So from what I know, the original complaint back in September when the first code enforcement case was started was simply because it was anonymous, but she said, why do we allow hotels in our neighborhoods? There's so many people here all the time, that kind of thing. Since then, I'm not sure. Well, I can say that at the planning commission meeting, there was a complaint brought up about one of the tenants of the short-term rental parking in front of owner occupant's driveway, and he was frustrated with that. So yeah, that's the extent of complaints on parking that I've seen, but we have had other complaints. Like someone called in saying that they don't, it's the same thing of this doesn't preserve the character of my neighborhood. I want my neighborhood to be residential. I want there to be people who live here who care, that kind of thing. So, but I can say that we get lots and lots of complaints about parking with short-term rentals all throughout the city, but maybe not specifically this one.
But the planning commission, they completed that. Counselor Garrett.
Mary, can you go back to your aerial map that shows the either of those. So you said that the property directly to the south is currently mixed use?
Yeah, so currently I think it's a locksmith or something, it's Acro Lock. They've been there, I checked their business license and it was before 2002. So they've been there since before the RC zone was kind of overlaid on the property. So how the RC zone kind of works, just so that everyone's aware, is back in 2002, I think it was April 2002, the city council at the time decided that there were certain parts of the city that they just kind of wanted to freeze development. So they overlaid this, this blue color, this new zone, kind of freeze it there. You're not allowed to go up in density. If you want to change the use, if Arcolog wanted to change to say automobile repair, that's not a permitted use in the RC zone. They'd have to come in and get a rezone to general commercial.
So it's basically grandfather in its current
Yeah,
use.
kind of, but it's because of the zone. So it's a permitted use in that zone because it was that use before.
So if you were to sell, then it goes back to residential conservation.
So if the person who owns Arco Lock, if he wants to sell, they could still do like a locksmith company. But the minute they want to change the use, that's when they have to come in and change the zone, or it has to be a permitted, one of the current permitted uses within the RC zone, which is basically just single family.
I just wondered, given the footprint of commercial use that you've got colored there in pink, if he would be interested in being part of the rezone, the proposed rezone.
Oh, yeah, like adding the Arco Lock place
Along
in.
500 West, but you haven't had any conversations. with
I
him.
haven't had any, no.
It's just a comment about the RC zone in general. I'm in favor of the denial, but I do think the RC zone is one of the problems that it's created is that we have a lot of houses that are very small and old on very large lots, and we can't create. We've had a couple of applicants come and say, I've got this creative way of creating more homes for ownership on this property, but they have to go through a very elaborate process. And so our RC zone really sends a strong signal that what we have is what we want forever. And I'm not sure if we want residential there, we ought to consider ways to create some flexibility on the kind of residential that, some infill projects that we've got some creative folks not too far from the rec center looking at that sort of thing that some of us toured. Those infill projects are very creative, but the RC zone is a really strong disincentive to that kind of creativity. I don't see that the issue here. I just wanted to.
I think, it's not switching to the next one. Oh, there you go. That's what it's so nice to have things like future land use plans, because we know in the general plan we want residential in the area, and then how can we, make that happen? So in the future, we do want it to be residential, then let's work with whoever comes in, and if everyone's in favor of that kind of thing. Yes.
I was gonna say right there, it looks like it's going from commercial to mixed use.
Mhm.
And have we had an application? Has it been the Fackler tire?
Do you mean like how it's mixed use in both maps for the
Well,
commercial?
isn't the Franklin plan the general plan for the future, whatever we want in the future? It's over there. It's all the pink is the mixed use.
Yeah.
So it's not really a commercial use, it's more of a mixed use.
Yeah.
It's not a McDonald's that's gonna go in on the corner. It's gonna be apartments with a flower shop maybe on the bottom floor, or a cookie vendor or something like that.
So what the Franklin TAC committee, what they talked about back then, they recognized the issues that, exist with the type of commercial that's there right now, how it doesn't look great, so when they said mixed use, they specifically said they wanted, small commercial center with neighborhood scale and adequate buffers to the neighborhood. So they recognize that commercial maybe makes sense here. It's a bigger intersection, but they want it to look good and they want it to seamlessly blend into the neighborhood as much as possible. Whereas right now, it doesn't really seem to do that at all.
Right, and then don't we have it, Bill, has it been approved on the Fackler tire portion? Is that apartments that are going in? Or is that
application.
okay, so it's never been, it's just been talked about.
No, hasn't, we've never, but we're expecting something like that to happen. Probably this.
Yeah, that's the rumors that have been going around is apartment complex on the Fackler Tire. You guys all know where Fackler Tire piece is.
Okay, any other questions for Mary? Counselor Whipple?
Yeah, I share some of Counselor Handley's concerns about the RC zone. I think it was a really good like stopgap measure that was necessary to protect the neighborhoods, but I don't think it's a really great long-term zone. I think it's like putting the pause, and then at some point we should actually look at what we want for those areas. The thing that I liked about this application was that he said that he would continue to occupy a portion of the property. I don't think we have any way to enforce that. If we had done something where we said that, you know, something that's a legal ADU could be used as a short-term rental or something like that, where we'd have an owner occupation mechanism, I think that would be good. And I'd like the flexibility for some people to be able to like rent out their ADU to students during the school year and then in the summer do it as a short-term rental. But that's not what this application is, and that's not what our code allows for. But the only way I would want to do an expansion of short-term rentals through the city is if we could enforce an owner occupation requirement for it. Because if you're right there in your Airbnb, you should be more responsive to things, and maybe you would be more sensitive to the noise and the parking and the things that your tenants would be causing. But even though that's a nice suggestion, I don't see that that's an enforceable thing in this proposal.
That's something they talked about a lot at planning commission as well, is called it like an ADU STR.
Yeah.
Really big acronym, but you know, it gets the point across, it or an occupation while still providing this thing that a lot of people use.
But right now, while we're still getting a good sense of how to do rental dwelling licenses and ADUs through the city, I think it would be inappropriate to jump ahead to add an STR to that kind of thing. Let's get good at what we're at first.
All right, any more questions for Mary? Thanks, Mary.
Okay, thank you.
Next item, a discussion regarding an ordinance to prohibit parking in front of mailboxes in certain areas in proximity to Timpview High School. And this will be presented by David Pyle from the council office.
Afternoon, councilors. You might remember talking about this in our last work meeting, so I'll cut straight to the important part. In our last meeting, we talked about doing an ordinance just around the Timpview High School area instead of citywide. So we met with legal and we decided that that can be done if that's the route that the council wants to go down. If you do go down that road, then this is the recommended boundary. We drew 2 boxes around the areas where most complaints seem to be coming from. So the first is from 3050 north up to 3950 north, and then from 450 east over to Timpview Drive. And then the second area would be from 3900 north, following that line until it meets Quail Valley Drive, and then follow from Quail Valley Drive back down to Timpview. And then these 2 smaller streets right here, 3230 north and 3100 north. In drawing these boundaries, we found that using streets to draw the divides is much better than using a radius, just because the cuts are a lot cleaner. You don't end up with neighborhoods cut in half or a street that's partially covered and partially not. If you're a resident that's trying to follow this ordinance, this is just a lot easier to follow. And it's worth mentioning again that the recommended distance is no less than 10 feet on either side. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday should give the Postal Service plenty of time.
Recording stopped.
Stop right there.
David, isn't it 10 feet altogether? Or are you saying 10 feet either side?
10 feet either side, so 20 feet overall. And that does come from the Postal Service. Am I okay to continue?
Yeah, it's still being broadcast.
Okay. Last work meeting, we also talked about creating a sunset ordinance to end when construction on the high school ends.
Recording in progress.
construction is scheduled to end in 2029. So the recommendation
Ridiculous.
would be to simply end at the end of that year. So starting on January 1st, 2030, the ordinance would no longer be in effect. And if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Counselor Bogdan.
How many actual complaints have we received?
Sandy, do you know exactly?
How many complaints have we received? Is it 5? Is it 200? Is it 1?
I'm not really sure because we haven't tracked them because we haven't enforced them before now. We do receive them all over the city. Let's just for 2 or 3 a month perhaps, and they're not always for single resident mailboxes. A lot of times it's for the big neighborhood mailboxes where we see more complaints than the smaller ones. When Timpview High is in session, I'll bet we receive 2 to 3 inquiries a day if we can enforce the mailboxes.
2 to 3 a day. So it is very much wanted in that neighborhood.
So people put signs on their mailboxes, they put A-frames out by their mailboxes, they go out and talk to the kids. It has become a huge issue.
Yeah, I was just going to say, being close to the epicenter here, it's really an annoyance, and unfortunately, the parking is going to stay unmanageable for the foreseeable future. I love the parameters. I think it's spot on. I like the idea of the 6 to 6 Monday through. I don't know why we do it Monday through Saturday. School's only in Monday through Friday, but I like the direction.
Oh, that's a good point.
If I can speak to that, the reason that we chose that was because the assumption is that the high school is what's generating this traffic. And yes, they have their regular school hours, but you also got to remember that there are extracurricular activities, people that are staying after hours for clubs, showing up for sporting practice on Saturdays, that sort of thing.
I don't think it'd be an issue at all if it wasn't that it's every day. That's what's bothering people. Like if it was just like a Monday odd time, I don't think the citizens would be that up in arms, but I think it's just that it's people go like a week without getting mail. They're like, ah.
So are they upset even about like the football games and things like that? Because 6 to 6 doesn't seem like it would cover a football game or a basketball game.
Well, the mail only goes till about 6.
So they don't really care if anybody's parking during a basketball game.
I think they're irritated by that too, but they've accepted it. And people are allowed to park otherwise, you know what I mean? Like, not gonna. No. But Councilor Garrett.
So Sandy, I think some of the feedback that we got from citizens, the 2 things that jumped out the most to me were, 1, they wanted this to be, restricted to a certain area, not citywide. And secondly, concern about how this would be enforced. This request isn't coming with a need for additional funding for another officer. How does this fit within your current
Right now,
resources to track and enforce?
Right now, I'm trying to change schedules with Timpview. We have an officer up there regularly.
Okay.
With all of this construction going on anyway.
Okay.
The mailboxes will make it a little more difficult for our staffing. Honestly, I'm gonna have to pull someone off another part of the city. Because at least until this is known.
Right.
For the first couple of months, plus we have the new junior high coming in, so staffing is not great right now. However, I do appreciate everything the council has done. We can do this, I think, with the complaints and the neighborhood and the residents that we speak to anyway of the Timpview. I think this is just going to be in our daily routine. Yes.
Okay.
No, we can do this.
Thank you.
I have to admit, I was really surprised the way people did want it citywide. I was shocked by that.
Yes.
I was shocked. I was like, oh, I didn't know that this was.
Yeah, I think that this will, my opinion is, I think that this is just a start. I think that it will grow. Just because of the issues that we're seeing.
Okay, Councilor Christensen.
So who actually coordinates with the school to educate people about the students specifically? I mean, is that the,
I think.
Administration
we're gonna- Someone's gonna have to, I think we can ask staff to reach out to the school board and they have to take care of it.
But from what I understand, your neighbor is over Timpview, and when I talked to Terry, she said to approach her.
Mhm.
And
No,
see if she
Jennifer
could do.
Partridge is over Timpview now.
Is Jennifer over
And
Timpview?
Lisa's over Centennial, for what it's worth, but
Hmm.
it needs to be, some people have to notify them and even notify the principal and let them disseminate.
Well, can they?
I was just wondering who has the button on that so that they do get educated. What we don't want to do is just, not educate people about the
Yes,
change.
for sure. Justin will make sure that people are, if this gets implemented tonight, we'll make sure that,
Yeah, I guess my question is on, from the city side or who to reach out to on the school side?
Yes.
The school side.
On
the
s-
principal.
Yeah, so who from the city reaches out to
Yeah.
the school?
So I
to make
think,
sure that-
I think this is where, sometimes we get a little crossways in our separation of government. I mean, we are always happy to reach out and let folks know a new ordinance has been implemented. But where this is something that code enforcement or that parking enforcement enforces, not the council office. We end up getting a lot of questions back and it's just redirected. So I think some kind of coordinated effort of a handoff to parking to the school district would be helpful so that they know who to contact.
Okay, if this gets
Okay.
implemented, Sandy is good to make sure the message gets
Yeah.
out.
Well,
We can reach out, plus, of course, as in any new ordinance, we do go as an educational, we're big on that, we'll educate before we actually impose the fine.
So we'll do warnings first for the first
Absolutely.
offenders. And you won't get a ticket the first time, you'll get it the second.
Well, to Craig's point, though, I think it's good if the school wants to, just to reach out to the school and say, hey, we're doing this. Do you mind doing
Yes.
some education on how to be a good neighbor and not park in front of a mailbox? Because if you do at this point forward, you're going to receive a ticket. And if they're willing to do that, I think that'll be a better tool than just the tickets.
Well, and Sandy, it sounds like that's what you do now. You take the responsibility for reaching out and informing.
I have not before, but I will this time.
No, I'm not telling you to. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
What I would hate is for people to get surprised. There shouldn't be any surprise.
They'll go with surprise, but they'll get a warning first.
Just in the enforcement side, we do have the discretion of issuing warnings. Plus, we will be up there when Timpview is in session in the cul-de-sacs, on the crosswalks. We have our senior officers up there. We talk to many of the students and and the residents up there. So again, we have started kind of implementing a teaching, but we will contact the student, we will contact the school and let them know I participated.
Hey, Counselor Whipple.
Yeah, so Timpview is going to be starting very soon, and while we cannot tell the school board or the high school what to do, it would be really useful if we got this information to them in time so that when students are coming through and getting their Chromebooks and everything, they can also be informed, by the way, your kids can't park anywhere near here. And the school district has a really good ability to disseminate information. You know, Wendy Dow does her little podcast video thing every week and things like that. So while we can't tell them what to say or that they should include this, we can give them information and then hope that they'll use it in their channels.
I will text all my family. That's two in front of my house. Hey, thank you. Yeah. All right, next discussion regarding the Provo City Council Housing Summit, and this will be presented by Malia Daly, our policy analyst.
Actually,
Okay, council. Oh, gosh. Michael's also gonna present. This is me, Michael, and David have been working a lot on this. Michael and David especially. I just get to talk. So this is our housing summit. I don't know how many of you are aware. Hopefully everyone. We put it on your calendar a month or two ago. Well, this is our housing summit that the Provo City Council is hosting. I'll just skip to the next. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over details right here and kind of just introduce what this is. So this is an event led by us, specifically you guys, not staff, to bring everyone, we'll kind of discuss who everyone is, to the table to discuss challenges and solutions to home ownership in Provo. So this was kind of spurred on by the council's main goal this year that they identified as home ownership and increasing home ownership within the city. So as part of that, in leadership discussions and discussions with other councilors, the decision was made to kind of host this housing summit. It's actually been talked about in years past as well, just kind of haven't pulled the trigger on it, and now we are. And it's to host Provo City, so our own staff and the council, state and federal legislators, we've sent out, save the dates already, nonprofit and housing industry stakeholders and advocates. So like the Home Builders Association, ULCT, the Housing Authority for the county and the city. There's members of the Commission on Housing Affordability up at the state, the CHA. And we've reached out to them to invite them to this. So this will be a night. It is going to be on October 10th, which is a Thursday night, and it should be in everyone's calendars already. And it's going to be hosted here in the chambers. So that's kind of the bare details. Michael's going to go over kind of the content of the summit and the draft agenda as we have it so far.
Yes. Okay, so this chart that we've made here kind of is just the basic structure of the summit, just kind of going this way. We're going to be talking about what we want, what we're doing, our challenges, and the ways that we need help. All right, so I'll just kind of go over each section, right? So what we want. So this column is basically a focused approach on the council's main priority of increasing owner-occupied housing in the city. So after some study and some contemplation, staff just determined that the three ways that this can best be achieved to achieve the council's goal is one, more new builds are being offered for sale rather than for rent. Renter households with a desire to buy a house have attainable options, and existing rental single-family housing can be converted into owner-occupied housing. So once we kind of establish all that, we want to show what we're doing. This will just highlight current projects or policies that Provo is currently involved in. We just really want to show the state that we're currently making an effort to achieve our goal of home ownership, while realizing that we also have some challenges. So what we are doing is great. We are making a little bit of progress. We do still have several challenges, some that are within our control and others that are outside of our control. We just want to make the state aware of Provo's unique challenges and figure out a way that they can help us or that we can create a partnership with them. So we have developed a couple of specific asks for the state to help us achieve each one of our individual goals. So kind of through this structure, we'll hopefully be able to tell the unique Provo housing story and become a partner with the state legislature and housing solutions. And basically we want to be able to convey the council's goals and give the Provo delegation the tools that they need to be able to represent our interests on the Hill. So how are we going to communicate all of this to our attendees? We're going to have a 2-hour slideshow presentation. No, just kidding. So we've basically broken up the summit into 3 main parts. First, we want to be able to tell the story of Provo's housing. This will just be a very short presentation told by our city council, where they telling where we currently are, like what we're currently doing. After that, we're going to have a interactive activity that will be designed to show the difficulties and complexities regarding housing from a citizen point of view. Then once we complete that interactive activity with all the attendees, we'll have some time to review the challenges and experiences from that activity and then link those to our unique challenges and the asks that we have from the state legislature. And that section will also include some in-depth discussion. And just keep in mind that this is a draft agenda. It's still very fluid. It may change, but that is just what we have right now. Back to.
Okay, so this is kind of a timeline. We really want to make sure that all of the council members are on board and we're all prepared and ready to go. Because like I said, the summit is going to be led by the 7 of you, not us. Our goal is to have us not talk at all during it and just have the 7 counselors be empowered and educated and really know what they're talking about and really feel like they're able to make a change at the state level. We want that for you guys. So here, yeah, I got you. So here we go. These are the next couple months. So the summit is in October. So we're in August right now. So we're going to continue to prepare with the summit. So we had last week, we actually met with ULCT with their executive director to kind of talk about, we gave them our draft agenda and we also have in our matrix that we made, we gave them that and had a really good discussion with them on summits that other cities have had or the counties have had and kind of what worked well, what didn't work well. Our next meeting, we really want to meet with the administration. Isaac's back here. We want to meet with Isaac and Scott and the mayor and really make sure that we're all together there. They work so much with ULCT as the mayor, as the president. And so we want to make sure that we have all the information possible there. ULCT has also invited us to come to a couple meetings to kind of just listen in and make sure we're part of the housing conversation so we're current. So during the summit, we know what everyone else in the city is talking about. And then during September, Michael, David, and I are putting together a housing summit. Like, we didn't want to call it a study guide, but it's kind of a study guide. A review, and we'll send that out to the council at the very beginning of September. So this is going to have like, here's what we're doing, here's the agenda, here's all the data that we have for Provo regarding housing, regarding rentals, owns, our land, taxes, everything. We're gonna make it really organized so it's easy to get through, but just so that way everyone's on the same page. Also in that will be included like previous state laws that are being considered at the state, federal legislation as well, federal programs, because we did send out invites to our federal delegation staff. So we'll send that out. We also wanted to highlight the Utah Housing Conference, September 9th through the 11th, which is in Midway. I've gone to it. This will be my 3rd year going this year. It's really great, super helpful. Patrice went last year, and I always think it's very helpful and useful. If anything, just to talk to people from other cities and learn what they're doing and their struggles and how they're approaching stuff. Yes, correct.
Just out of curiosity, who's planning on going to that?
I'm going one day.
Hopefully everyone. That'll be awesome. And then October, we are coming back to the October 1st work meeting. This will be kind of the final review. We'll kind of run through the agenda in more detail on that date. Make sure everyone's on the same page. You'll have your review for a month at that point. So any final questions, then we can kind of walk through that. And the 10th is the summit. And then post-summit, we want to make sure we're kind of planning on how to do this. And this will be in good conversations, I think, with the administration, ULCT, on how to continue engagement and really capitalize on the conversations that we had during the summit to make sure that we continue to be a partner and a source of information during the legislative sessions. That way, if the legislator is like, I want to do this bill, how would this affect the city? They come to us and they look to us as knowledgeable people in that space. One thing I did want to mention for August and September, Michael and I will be hosting, we didn't know what to call it, and my dad's a professor, so I'm just calling it office hours. But we're hosting policy analyst office hours. So 2 hours in August and 2 in September. It'll be different days, an hour each. And we'll send out those calendar invites either tonight or tomorrow. And then you can just, any counselor can sign up and they can come in and talk to us about any housing questions they have. They can come send questions beforehand and we can look up research, we can show what we have. If you're like, actually, I just want to talk about our own code, I don't even want to talk about summit related stuff, but this code regarding housing in our city seems weird, then let us know and maybe we can bring in someone from development services during that, or we can do our best to find answers. We just want to be available to you in preparation for this, especially during September when we have the guides to you guys, the reviews. I feel like those will be helpful times to make sure that we're providing you all the answers that you want. And I think that's all that we have for you today, but if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, guys. You've spent a lot of time on this. I know this is going to be a big lift for the staff, so we're really appreciative. I think this is a great idea. It kind of came from an idea that George had that leadership kind of went with. And our goal is to communicate better with the state and, you know, advocate more for our city, right? Because our city is very unique. But was it Gary who had a question? Councilor Garrett.
So who do you have commitments from so far to attend? Did I see Congressman Curtis' staff member
Yes.
submitted? Who else at the state level?
We have a number of staff from ULCT. We have like maybes from a lot of state legislators. I think the state date is kind of far out. They're busy. And then Jennifer's lovely and is taking care of all the attendees and figuring out who is coming.
And then
So she would
who
be-
are your housing industry stakeholders? Who would that include? Little developers
Yes.
invited?
Yes, so Home Builders Association, reaching out to them because they represent a good group there. And then also there's members of the CHA, so the Commission on Housing Affordability. They have key people on there representing developers, representing that space, that we've reached out to them as well.
Sometimes it seems like they just want to keep building what we don't want.
Yes. We want to make sure we have the full picture there in the room though.
Okay.
So.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Councilor Whipple.
I'm really delighted that you're preparing a guide for us. And I'm a competitive person. I don't know how many of my fellow counselors are, but I would love it if we had some sort of a quiz or contest to see which counselor learns the guide the best. Because I feel like the more all of us know this information, the better we'll all be able to talk to everybody who's at the meeting. We don't have to say, oh, wait, I don't quite remember that, but Malia knows it. Like, we want to be like sharp and on our feet with the stats and the numbers and our particular problems and how we apply the law and those problems to the situations we see in our city.
Flashcards. But only after we attend office hours.
Office
I'm all in on the office hours. I want to-
So I don't want to create more work for staff to create a contest or quiz for us. But I do want to challenge all of us to like treat that guide as though we are going to get tested on it and graded on a curve. And so that we can like really show everybody who comes that we know the problem here. We know what we're talking about. We're not just, you know, small and parochial and trying to resist state control. We know our stuff. And I think this can be a really good way for us to show that. Thank you.
Noted.
All right. All right. Thanks, Malia.
Possible, really, really.
All right, next discussion regarding the Provo Youth Council presented by Justin Harrison.
Thanks, Ren.
That's post.
Almost done.
All right. So wanted to take a few minutes in work meeting just because it's one place that we can get you all in one room and talk all together legally on open meeting law. Our favorite thing. So really had some news that's a little sad about our youth city council advisor, Helen Peterson, who has been just great for years and years, long before I started with the city.
is retiring from her full-time position as the gear coordinator with UVU. And it has been just this great mesh of what she does professionally with her engagement and love for the students that have served in years past on the Provo City Youth Council. So we are losing her. We're sad about that. She's retiring and gonna do great things and hopefully spend lots of time on vacation with her husband. And so I wanted to get just the city council's thoughts and opinions on what you want to see out of the Provo Youth City Council. For some of you, we talked a little bit about this in your onboarding right after the election. You know, what is the youth council? What do they do? And it's kind of jumped around over the last 30 years. It is part of Provo City Code. We've got a purpose and a number of requirements of what the youth council is, but really it's a venue to provide training for youth in our community, for them to get engaged with their local government, and to be advisory to the city council on issues impacting Provo's youth. So the organization is under the direction of the council chair or the chair's designee. The council director establishes program criteria, and we've got a standard application we use. In years past, I've worked closely with Helen and have really developed a simple guide for what these students do each year. They're very focused on being involved in the community and providing service and engaging in service opportunities both within the city and outside of the city. This last year, they came and had dinner with the city council. That was kind of a new thing we had put together, but I think a really great interaction that happened between our work and night meetings a couple months back. But it's really kind of in this loose, I don't mean that in a bad way, but kind of this loose framework. And more than anything, want to hear your feedback on what you would like to see out of this program or not see out of the program. This was a discussion we had last Thursday. It started in council leadership meeting, and you may have seen the notes regarding kind of what's been going on, but really this is meant to be an open forum and discussion for what you want to see out of this.
I'd like to make a comment. I've always felt like we never interact enough with them, and that I feel like it's a missed opportunity, and I don't quite know what the solution to that is. I mean, I know there's a risk of it sort of becoming burdensome, right? But I wonder, I mean, I really enjoyed the dinner. I talked more at length with a couple than I did with all of them, but I mean, I really enjoyed the students I met. And I feel like it's a really valuable thing for them. I think it's valuable for us. I wonder if something could be done where maybe they kind of follow us for a week or for a month or something like that, where they kind of sit in our seat a little bit, like we send them the packet that we read, or I don't know. I don't know if I'm trying to think of a way to do this that's not lots of extra time for us, because I think our bandwidth is pretty limited. But if there was some way where they kind of shadowed us and learned a little bit more about what it's like to be on the council more directly than they do. I mean, I don't know all the things that they have been doing because we don't see a lot of that. So I don't know if that's already accomplished in lots of other ways, but it just feels like to me that I can't remember any substantive conversation I've had about how we do what we do with them, nor do I feel like I've ever had a substantive conversation about what their concerns are about youth in Provo. So it just feels like the connection points have been weak for a long time. And I think I think they've had a valuable experience in the program, but I don't feel like I feel like it's been almost entirely independent of us. And I regret that. I just want a little bit more connection. I don't think, like I say, I think there's a light touch version of what I'm thinking of that doesn't hopefully have to be too much work, but I wouldn't mind even, being paired up with one of them for a brief period of time or something like that, where they could, maybe we figured it out together. Like, do you want to come with me to a meeting with some citizens where we're going to talk about Slate Canyon parking problems, or, something joyous like that they could become a part of. Yeah, I mean, I just think that could be really bad. My goal for them would be, I want to see future leaders come out of this, right? You want people who feel inspired to be engaged in civic service, and I don't know that if I had a chance to have something like that when I was their age, it would have been really, really impactful for me, I think. So I'd like to take advantage of that, even if it's just, one thing that I do with one of them, that's better than what I'm doing now. Anyway.
Counselor Christensen.
So are we limited in the number of people, the number of students?
It hasn't been limited. It's something we've thought about when we Helen and I sat down last year and went through the program. One of the bigger difficulties we have found is it's not so much because they start to wean themselves down, this group. What we've seen in talking with other cities is you get a lot of kids, and maybe not a bad thing, but there are a lot of ambitious kids that want to be involved in this, but they've got a lot of other things going on. And so it starts to become a resume builder more than anything, as opposed to actual engagement. And I think that's what I would like to see, is kids that are really, really dedicated and engaged, to George's point, that want an in-depth experience and want to take something from this, as opposed to putting in a college, application, member of the Provo City Youth Council.
So in terms of the application, do they apply? Do they get voted by their school?
They don't. So we have really made a limited barrier. In code, it is limited to high school students. So 9th to 12th grade, they have to be a resident of Provo and attend really a resident of Provo. They don't necessarily have to attend a school in Provo because they can attend a virtual school. And then there's a number of, really basic questions they answer and some criteria. And we've thought about that, do we create a higher bar, and does that wean people out? There are cities that have used, you've got to bring a letter of recommendation, you've got to have a certain grade, or a certain GPA, all these different things, but it just becomes a lot more on the administrative side that track those down and tackle those. This last year, we had about 12 members that were fairly active through the year. That's what I would consider the core group. They attended the day of the legislature. These were kids that they intentionally took time out of their day to participate, as opposed to just signing up on a club and activity day and maybe showing up to a meeting. So for that reason, we haven't limited it before, just because it's stayed a fairly manageable group. I think when you start growing larger into the 20+, it can get a little unruly.
Counselor Bogdan.
So I have a couple of things. Number one, I know that the school district has stepped up their game with theirs. So I guess it would be good to see how they do theirs.
Student council.
No, it's not necessarily I don't know. Do they have, they have council people, youth council people that are a part of their board. I know I've seen that. I haven't really dug down to see what exactly they do. So I think it would be good to see who they're getting. I think they just have one from each high school. And I think they do attend some of their meetings and they do have, they're kind of like an advisory board. Number two, it did say something about an advisory board. So it would be interesting if they came up with some of their own concerns for youth in Provo and maybe did a presentation to the council on some of those things, maybe even during a council meeting, so that they could have more advocacy for what their things were. And then if it does interest us, then maybe they can help us through the process of getting that into implementation. That would be more of an advisory board, kind of carry that through to be more of an advocate kind of a teaching role.
I'm cognizant that I know our staff doesn't have time to be the leaders of this and manage it. I do think that someone, a parent or one of the kids that wants to do it, or it's the school or some, a world studies teacher or some, relevant teacher might want to host it. I don't know. It's tricky as far as who's had the time to do it and the means.
And I think that goes back to the school district. If the school district has something similar, is this program needed here?
Yeah.
But if not, what about Helen's replacement? Is he, whoever that is, are they willing to take on this role?
There isn't an existing replacement.
They're not gonna replace her at all?
Well, she was like a volunteer.
Didn't she?
You're talking about in her position, we've reached out and tried to track down who her replacement is.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have the bandwidth to run a program that
Yeah.
doesn't have someone like her.
Yeah.
So we gotta find. I
And
wonder, Aaron Scavlin's running the civic engagement program at BYU. And they've met with us. I wonder if there's something equivalent in. Anyway, I'm just thinking that there might be something at BYU that we could lean on, that like the secondary ed people, or I don't know. There's some sort of civic engagement emphasis that they have.
No, that's a great one. I mean, we've got a list of,
I've got some people some contacts I could recommend.
that would be great. We started to think of just other groups of students that have reached out and engaged with us. Between the CAPS program, we've had them come and present each year. We've had the students from the Mecca Knights program, the robotics club, that have reached out. We had the Milk and Cookies group come in last year.
Yeah, see, I like that. They actively did want to do things and they wanted us to come to something or be like, we weren't getting the same interest from this group per se, right? And I get they're extra busy and have multiple things on the plate, and we don't want to, you don't want to force anyone to do anything. So I don't know, it just gets like, if they want it, they will come. I don't know. Councilor Garrett.
I wonder, Justin, if over the course of the year, if Helen or any of the participants shared with you any details, we wish there were more of this, consistent with what some of the things that George said. We wish there were more opportunities for engagement.
Yeah, and we discussed that a few times. One of the big things was trying to get some time directly with the city council, and I think that was great. The dinner that we planned and allowed for that engagement. They had started down the path. We had really hoped for them to pick an issue and to hold a town hall, as invite your friends, your fellow classmates to see what are the issues of the youth in Provo. And that had started and really was being led by a great student, but a busy student, and kind of fell off. So I think that's where some of our concerns was just bandwidth from students committing to things. I think Councilor Bogdan's point, allowing them to come and present, to be part of that advocacy effort, that's a useful experience for them. Whether it just be honing presentation skills really diving into research, advocating for a cause that you believe in. That was something that we had hoped to complete this last year, but then kind of fell off. I'm trying to think. Some of the big things were just, this was really the last 2 years, last year, less so. All of the youth council groups seemingly across the state had kind of been in this big lull coming out of COVID. Activities were just more difficult. So last year, things started to ramp up. This year was finding a, really getting them on a routine schedule of, we're gonna meet the second Thursday of the month at the rec center, just so there was some order and continuity. So that was helpful. I think there are some other ways that we can piggyback on existing city events and or volunteer opportunities. I think getting involved with Tara and with the My Hometown Initiative would be a wonderful place for them to provide service, whether it's through My Hometown Days of Service, whether it's doing things there at the actual resource center. So I'm hesitant to try to reinvent the wheel and think of new things, because I think there's so many things we do already that we can plug them in.
I like that idea. Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, I didn't even know we had a Provo Youth Council for the first 2 years I was on the council, because they never came or said anything to us, and I didn't know that they existed to say anything to them. So it was not a program that was working particularly well for me as a counselor. I don't know what the kids were able to get out of it. I think if we continue something like this, we should have some substantive requirements for them. Like, if you're going to be on this council, you have to attend at least one neighborhood district meeting and a city council meeting, or something like that, so that there's some investment instead of just something that they can pad their resume and their college applications with, that, I signed up for this thing, but then didn't actually do anything with it. It does seem like something that is best housed with like a school, or like a club type of thing. And I don't know if we have any kind of school clubs that go across the different schools. Maybe that's not possible, and that may be why it's sitting with the city council instead of one of the individual schools. But I think we don't have the staff to be essentially a club advisor, which is what these kids would need to really have a strong and meaningful experience, and that we could do something with them. So I have very ambivalent feelings about this program. I think it could be really good, but I don't think that we are interested in investing the money to pay for a staff person to run this opportunity for a handful of high school students in the area. And since I'm not willing to use tax funds for that, and we don't have a good volunteer stepping up to do that, I don't know if it's worthwhile to continue to keep this in the city code. I think that if a group came to us and said, we want to do this, then we could support them without that being part of the city code. Because part of our role as counselors is to be accessible to the public and to our constituents. And we've certainly had our little milk and cookies people and the robotics groups, all of these youth groups that want to come to us, even Boy Scout troops, we welcome them. And if there were a group that wanted to really dive into municipal government, we would cooperate them. But I don't think we want to be the ones in charge of steering the ship and herding the children along.
Councilor Hilbert.
Yeah, I agree. I think let the market decide. Let's not do it. And if we get people knocking on our door and pounding on our door saying we really want to do this, then we can bring it back in some form or fashion. Or if
Okay.
there's an individual that says, oh, I really want to learn about the council, I'll mentor him myself. But I definitely don't want to subsidize or manage some program that's just, a resume pattern.
Well, I would make a motion then that we take it out of code. Just in the Provo Municipal Council code portion. Have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Counselor.
Yeah, I feel like that might be a little premature. I mean, I'd rather see if we can't find somebody. If we can't find somebody, then I think we have to make that evaluation. But I mean, if I don't want to just let the market decide, in the sense that I want to advertise that we've had this program. I want, whether it's secondary ed people or civic engagement people, to know that we've had this program, that we've had this great person, Helen, who's run this for years. And now we're faced with a situation where we're looking to rethink it, rebuild it if possible. And if we just really strike out, then we strike out. I don't know that this needs to take hours and hours of our time. I don't think it needs to take months to do, but I'm open to striking it eventually. I feel like if we make that decision now, then it's just dead, and I'd rather beat a little of the bushes and see if we can't find out some opportunities. And maybe it looks different than it is. Maybe it's college students and not high school students who would be a lot more serious about why they're doing it. And or maybe it is a high school program, but it's only one high school, or I don't know, who knows what it ends up looking like. But I just don't want to walk away without exhausting all that effort.
You want to put it on probation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would all agree. It sounds like we all agree. We don't want to spend money on this because we don't really have the resources, and we don't have the resources in terms of staff. And so, but we have a little window here to try to find somebody who could be a partner. And if we really can't come up with that person, then I think we have to make a decision about whether or not we just say, we're not going to have this in our code, or we could leave it in our code and just say, we don't have to do it unless we have a partner. I don't know.
I still don't know that it's appropriate in our code. That's also part of my thing.
Say that again.
I don't know that it's even appropriate in our code, even if we continue it. Like, why is it? I think that seems unnecessary. Counselor Christensen?
Yeah, I like the idea of seeing if there's someone who would take this on. The biggest challenge in running anything is what do you say no to? It's easy to say yes to everything. And that's, so I think it does make sense for us to be very careful about, because any staff bandwidth spent on something that isn't leveraged, I think is not appropriate. So I don't know that I would move. I don't know that I would support, let's take it out of the books tonight. I like the idea of saying, let's see if we can find someone, or does someone present themselves who would take the leadership on this. But it's not something that I see the city council necessarily do.
To Chair McKay's point, my suspicion is this is in the code so it doesn't disappear, right? I mean, you could, it's not really there has to be a law on the books in order for this program to be run. So you could take it out of the code and still run the program. And in fact, that gives you more flexibility because then you can change how you run the program. I suspect that the pro, so that's the con, is that it's taking up part of the code and it's inflexible and hard to amend. The pro is that because it's on the books, it maybe gets remembered. So just as, just brainstorming, one other option is we could treat it, trying to think I had an example in my head, but you could put it in the council handbook instead of in the code. And in fact, you could have one sentence in the chapter on committees that refers to an appendix, and then the appendix could be something that's under the control of council staff that they can update to change the program every time changes to the program are necessary, without having to come and try to do a code amendment or even a handbook amendment. So just a thought about, based on what Chair McKay was saying.
Counselor Bogdan?
In light of his suggestion, I would go back to Brian's thing, but I was gonna say to take it out of the code. If we do vote to wait and see, I think we need a sunset clause on that. Say, okay, we'll give it 2 months. And then if 2 months comes and we still can't find anybody at that point, we'll take it out of the code. But I do like what Brian's saying, that we do have that option to just take it out of the code. I prefer that in the sunset clause of taking it out altogether.
Counselor Whitman?
So giving it a time of the period to see, but who is looking for a new advisor? Who is doing that work?
We can do that.
Is that with the housing summit and everything, that's an appropriate additional task?
Well, that's up to the council, but we are willing
Well,
to do that.
let's take a vote on the motion. Is there any more discussion on the motion?
Well, one more thought I had based on what Brian was saying about putting it in the council handbook on the committees. It probably would be a good idea to designate a council member to be a liaison to the youth council, so that at least one council member would have that connection and tie to it, just like we have people with, going to TMAC or the library board or the water board or power. I think that would be a useful change that we could do, so that if we're able to keep this program going, we do have a connection to it, because we haven't had anything like that before. And that would be helpful.
And just a clarification on the motion, again, because the motion is to take it out of the code, that requires a code amendment. So you're not actually taking it out of the code by voting right now.
Right.
You're directing staff to come back at a future evening meeting with a code amendment to remove it from the code. Just to clarify.
And that could be the time that we use to look for it,
So we do
so
like
that if
3
we don't
months?
find someone, then that amendment would be ready. But if we do find someone, then it would be unnecessary to take it out, or
take
we
it
would
in the
just want to
handbook
change it.
and Put it in committees.
Okay.
Is there, maybe this goes back to what you were saying before, but I mean, is there any reason why it has to be taken out of the code? It's not like it's binding. I'm just thinking like
Code
a
cleanup.
future, but if a future council sees, in the past, we've had a youth council. This council was unable to find a volunteer, but 4 years from now, they find a perfect person who does it. Suddenly we have this phenomenal program.
Yeah, but in
And
the
it's like,
handbook,
why
we
would we
don't-
strike it? I don't know.
I mean,
Seems like.
In the handbook, why do you lose? You don't lose anything.
my response to that would be yes and no. I mean, the code says it shall exist, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think Councilor McKay has voiced some philosophical objections to it being in the code. With it being in the code, it means it is the law in Provo City that there shall exist a Provo Youth City Council. Now, can we ignore that? Sure.
Can we change the verb tense?
Permissive.
Well, I mean,
The
we
council
could,
may.
but again, that goes back to the kind of the fundamental vision of what is the code for. The code is law, which is why I would suggest if you don't want it to be the law, but you don't want it to be forgotten, then I think that council handbook is a better place.
Counselor Hoban?
Brian, so I seconded this motion, but how would I do a different motion to say that we're gonna move it out of code? So in 3 months, we can move it, we will move it out of code if we haven't found. Well, actually, I think it does need to just be out of code. Never mind. I think it just needs to be in the handbook.
Well,
So,
yeah, so that
I want to
would-
move
that
it out
would
of
be-
code and into the
So
handbook.
that would be an amended motion to amend the motion that's on the table to add the component that we, instead of merely deleting it from the code, we also added to the handbook.
So I'd like to make an amended motion that instead of merely deleting it out of the code, we move it to the handbook.
I would second that.
Right, any discussion on the motion?
It's
No, so the amended motion gets voted on first because it supersedes. And then
So can you just spell out the implications again? So this is just, now it's just like a program that the council likes. It's not a law.
Right, yes. And I mean, and de facto, I guess de facto in the motions, the staff is gonna have to come back to you with a handbook amendment that tells you how they're gonna put it in the handbook, right? So when they do that, they can spell out recommended changes that they have to how the program would function. And you can approve those when you approve the handbook amendment. So in other words, you're gonna get another chance to vote on it again. Basically, there are two ways, because you're gonna have an evening meeting where you actually have to vote on the code amendment to strike this from the code. And you're gonna have a work session where you review what the proposal is to be put into the handbook.
And you just said 3 months from now.
I actually,
Wasn't in the.
I took that out. Yeah, I didn't actually officially add that.
Could you add it back in? I'd vote for it if you did.
Well,
How's
there's
that?
no difference, like it still will be in the handbook. Doesn't limit us
But he
to
likes
the council.
the timeline.
I know, but I just.
Yeah, I'm fine with the timeline. I just, doesn't make sense to have it as a law. It seems weird.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with the 3-month timeline.
Well, if I'm in the minority, I'm in the minority.
Yeah,
I can live with that.
so what I would really love is in this time while we're looking at changing the code or handbook or the program entirely, that we put it out on Open City Hall and we try to engage with the schools to see if there is interest and what the high school students would be interested in doing so that we would have their input. And so that we would know if there is enough support from this demographic to actually make it a viable program. Because I don't think we've had wide engagement from the youth on this. And I think part of that's because most of them don't even know that it has existed before. So this can be a really good opportunity to see if we told everyone about it, would there be support for it? I think this is great. And if we've got it kind of on a chopping block, then that adds like dramatic pressure and tension. We might get more response and engagement that way.
You're thinking reality TV show.
You know, people care more if they think they might be losing something, even if it's something they never ever used before or wanted. Like, how dare you change this? But we might get more engagement that way.
It's common sales tactic. Take it away.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take a vote on the amended motion. Counselor Christensen,
Yes.
Counselor Garrett,
Yes.
Counselor Hoban,
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes, Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Handley,
No.
Counselor Bogdan,
Yes.
it's okay, Josh, and that passes 6-1.
I apologize, with that 3 months.
There wasn't
No.
a 3-month, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
I just wanted to include it if it was.
Yeah. Thanks, Renee.
All right, there's no objection. We will now adjourn the Provo Municipal Council and convene as the redevelopment agency governing board by unanimous consent.
All right, the governing board of the redevelopment agency of Provo will consider a motion to close the meeting. Will be presented by Brian Jones.
Thank you, Chair Whipple.
I'm gonna turn my microphone on. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I love this. I've watched that. That is unbelievable. Sorry.
There is an item that to be presented in closed session. It has to do with reasonably imminent litigation, which is one of the approved reasons for closing a meeting. So it would be appropriate for the board member to move to close the meeting at this time.
All right, do we have such a motion?
I move.
All right, and do we have a second?
I'll second, or Travis a second.
Okay. All right, so board member Christensen has moved that we close the meeting and it's been seconded by board member Bogdan with a silent second by board member Hoban. And so we will now have a verbal roll call vote. Board member Christensen,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Hoban,
Yes.
McKay,
Yes.
Whipple is yes,
Handley.
Handley,
Yes.
and Bogdan.
Yes.
All right, we will now close that meeting by a vote of 7-0. So let's go reconvene in that pre-function room. Get it going.
Recording
stopped. I'll be the one no vote.
It would be fun. I really don't want to. This meeting has to keep going.
That's why it's unanimous consent. That's
I'm
like,
not done.